No, okay. Now I'm very happy to talk to him in person again, a teacher, a good member of the Wisdom Sages community. He's doing his podcast on a daily basis, and he's doing so much for the community. Thank you for having you here, Prabhu.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Thomas.
You just brought out your book, which you worked on for a few months or years. It's
A few
called
years, about
Few
4 years
Years,
it
right?
took me to write that.
It's called From Punk to Monk. It's great. It's has all these amazing, inspiring stories inside that those who follow you already know a few from of them, but still there are new ones as well. And how was this writing process for you in the end? I mean, you needed to stick for a long time to one thing, right?
It was, truthfully, it was very difficult. I wasn't really interested in writing a memoir, but the publisher encouraged me to do it. You know me sort of well, so my head is sort of all over the place. So I could write it in little chunks, but I didn't use a ghostwriter. I wrote it all myself. I wrote it in little chunks, and then I tried to string all these chunks together. And
Mm,
basically, the story of my life from getting into punk music as an alternative and hardcore and becoming straight edge in New York City in the 80s, um, meeting different people, reading books by sadhus and saints and mysticism. And that drew me into bhakti yoga. And this was during a very sort of, how you could say, a very magical, crazy time in New York City, which is the early 80s. And it was a very dangerous place, New York City, at that time. But it was the center of people just doing their own thing, and musically and culturally and artistically, and it gave birth to alternative ideas of everything from food to clothing to culture to even spiritual paths. And as you know in the book, I meet a leader of a gang in New York,
mm.
and even though he's in a violent gang, he was interested in Eastern spirituality, and he turned me on to the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And the book sort of goes into that pretty, I think, pretty quickly. I think I start
Mhm.
off in India, and then I go back and tell the story. I start off in an Indian train.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And so you talked a lot about this journey and so many people you met during this path. And was there kind of a special moment where you knew, I mean, you tried many tools or also Eastern wisdom teachers, but was there a special moment when you knew sort of bhakti it is?
Um, I'm always open to learning new ways to evolve. But at the same time, in America, they have these things called a salad bar, which has
Mhm.
salad and spaghetti and Chinese food. And it's like, and sometimes you think, wow, this is great. I'm going to take a little bit of everything. And when you take a little bit of everything, you end up getting indigestion. You don't feel good after you eat it. Better you just stick to one thing. So, it's like when you shop comparatively in the store, I think different paths and different spiritual practices all have their weightiness and their substance, but eventually it's good to get focused on one path and try to go deep into that path. Not saying anything bad about other paths, but you have to figure out what's going to work best for you. And sometimes when you pray to God, you say, God, please direct me. And you got to get whatever God gives you. And you don't necessarily expect it to come into a particular package, but this is what God has given you to move you forward. So I like the teachings of India because I wasn't an exclusivist. I believe that there's many different paths to spirituality. I believe that there's truth in all traditions. They're like nuggets of truth. But I did find the teachings of ancient India, the thread that tied all these truths together. Like I understand now better, I feel, about Christianity. It's not like, okay, I became a Hindu, now I hate the Christians. The opposite.
Mm.
I can appreciate Christianity more because I feel like I understand the essence of the teachings. And that's the beauty of this tradition of India, this Sanatan Dharma, this Bhakti Yoga, is that it's a very, very zoomed out view of not that we are in particular religions, but there is one religion, and that's to wake up our spiritual life. And however you can do that, that's a great thing. And so in Bhakti Yoga, they say there's just a spiritual being and then there's a higher power. And you have to reconnect with that higher power in this short lifetime. And if not, you got to learn your lessons of this life again and again and again. And I think it's safe to say that we know already from this lifetime, if I don't learn my lessons, they come again and again. If I don't learn detachment, if I don't learn that I can't control, if I don't learn to control my senses, then I'm just going to have to come back and learn it again next month, next year, in a decade from now, because we are here to grow and evolve. We're not here just to collect stuff that we can't hold on to. We're here for a few days only in this life to learn how to grow and become and transform from the caterpillar to the butterfly. And that's what these teachings teach.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also mentioned it in the book, like, so in this part when you said, okay, we learn stuff, and if we learn it, we move forward. If not, we come into the same pattern again. And it's also, you talk in a good way again about all this stuff that our society still has, this victimhood. We love to be the victim from stuff that happens from the outside. Can you tell us about that?
Well, sure. The idea is that, for example, a prisoner gets sent to prison. And he has it tough in prison. You live in a cell now. You get very little time outside. You're around other criminals. Your freedom is taken away. But to the degree that the prisoner blames the warden is like the head of the police. You can't go around and blaming the warden. Oh, prison stinks. It's not fair. They gave me a bum rap. No. If you really want to get out of prison, you have to accept full responsibility. I got what I got. I got what I got, and now I want to move forward. Stop blaming, stop complaining, and guess what happens to a prisoner? When they fully accept, I've done something wrong, and whatever it is, how can I move forward? Then reformation comes. It's not 10 years, 30 years, life sentence. Reformation doesn't necessarily come then. Reformation comes when I give up the complaining and the blaming. And the same is true with our spiritual life. To the degree that I blame my government, God, my family of origin, my tough situation, when people live in blame and entitlement, they suffer and they stay very small. When people live in victimhood, they stay very small. When people accept what they have and see, you know what? This is a chance for me to grow, a chance for me to climb higher, a chance for me to make a better choice. Then their destination changes. Then they experience a new type of freedom, and then they get led to make better choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's totally. It makes totally sense. And so when I was reading the book, I was thinking, because there's also such an important person in your life, Raghunath Swami, and I was always already waiting. Okay, when is he coming? When it's coming his part?
Right.
And it's come. I think it's coming after the half. So can you describe? Can you describe the first moment when you met him? And did you already knew that he would become such an important figure in your life?
I did not know. I've heard about him. And in the book, I share that I met him because he was visiting America and our band was on tour. And he just took care of us. And like we stayed at the ashram that night in the United States, in an ashram. And he welcomed us and he stayed up all night with us. And this was probably 10 years at least, maybe longer, before his book came out, A Journey Home, which is an incredible modern-day classical yoga, philosophy, adventure story. If you like adventure, spiritual adventure quests, his book is great. Raghunath Swami, A Journey Home. And so when I met him, he stayed up all night with us and told us that story, basically the story of his book. And then I didn't see him for a year, and we got in this tragic car accident, which I mentioned in the book. And I called him up and I said, I'm taking this as a sign from God. I have to get serious about my spiritual life. And I said, I don't know if you remember me. I'm the singer of that band. Can I come to India to heal? Do you know some place where there's I wanted to do like a water fast clinic. and just fast on water and let my body heal it naturally or accelerate my healing. And he said, yeah, well, get here as soon as you can and I'll make all arrangements. And then after my time in the clinic, he completely just, took care of me. And I shadowed him around the ashram for a few weeks more. And at that time, he just won over my heart. And so at that time, I realized this man has a special place in my life. And sometimes we meet people like that, and we should never forget that meeting where someone has been tagged by God to bring you to a new chamber, a new room, a new level of existence. And those are always special, magical relationships, because once you enter one door, then that door has many other doors for you to go through as well. And so they're special. Spiritual relationships are not ordinary relationships. It's as if God designed them for people to meet and to transform us. God has tagged a person to transform us. And they're special, if not magical, relationships. It doesn't matter what religion you are or whether you don't even believe in a religion. There is a spiritual energy that is directing you. And if your intention is in the right place, then you'll get the right messengers to speak to you.
Yeah. What would you say? How can people, I mean, who still don't have so much to do with yoga or spirituality, how can they open up themselves more for these signs, for these messengers, let's say?
Well, there's such a first of all, it comes from hearing spiritual truth. That's why we created a daily podcast on spirituality, so people can hear on a regular basis and feel part of a community. But you could also, if you're too shy to go to some temple, or maybe there's no temple near you, we created a podcast where you can listen in the privacy of your own home, and you can imbibe this stuff. And most of our listeners we never meet. There are thousands of them out there that listen to the podcast, and they think, oh, and we become what we put in our minds on our downtime. We become what we put in our minds in our downtime. So if I'm driving to work and I'm going to put on a spiritual podcast, it's going to affect my mind in a spiritual way. If I'm going to listen to a political podcast and I'm going to find somebody new to hate, if I'm going to follow a gardening podcast, I'm going to learn things about techniques on gardening. But if I want to find more about my spiritual life, then you listen to wisdom lessons on a regular basis. So that's what we try to offer our community, because we feel like it's important, not just for them, it's important for me to hear spiritual truth on a regular basis. So we go through this very ancient text on how to connect the self, or the soul, in America we call it the soul, with our higher source. And this has been a study in India for millennia. India is like the PhDs in spirituality. People would travel all over the world. When Greece was in its infancy, India had universities and massive libraries, and all this stuff was destroyed by invaders. But India is known for its epic and vast amounts of wisdom literature, not just a small book, but volumes and volumes of literature on metaphysics, spiritual evolution, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, scholarship, and a culture, an entire culture that promotes spirituality. Not that culture is separate than spirituality, but art, dance, cooking, fashion, even architecture, language, metaphysical studies. These are all part of spirituality. They're all part of yoga system. They're all part of settling the mind. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're doing, as you just mentioned, you're doing this podcast on a daily basis. I mean, that's crazy.
It's a little crazy.
It's. I mean, you wake up. So Twitter. There's one part of your morning routine for sure, because you're doing it each day. Where do you take all this energy from? And your enthusiasm is also something that affects a lot of people.
Thank you, my friend. There's two ways to become enthusiastic. One is just be enthusiastic, like it's something you can switch. And another thing is you associate with inspirational or enthusiastic people or things like literature, media, etc. And I think also part of enthusiasm is we need to figure out what our divine offering is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, for example, in America, we have a mental health crisis. The whole world's experiencing it. But if you often ask people, well, okay, before you get on that medication, do you love your job? Oftentimes people say, no, I've just got this job. I hate it. Well, of course you have a mental health crisis. You're not doing what you're good at, what you're born to do, you know? And then if you are doing what you're good at, are you doing it in a spiritual manner? So you're doing it for the benefit of the world. And if not, we have to start to dial that in. How can I do what I do to benefit the world? And maybe I have to change my occupation, or maybe I have to spiritualize my occupation, or maybe I just like to make money and I'm really good at it. So maybe I need to take some of those resources and give it to a person that is doing something spiritual and helping people, and I can feel part of something bigger. Or maybe I need a complete change. I'm barking up the wrong tree totally. So these are all important questions before we take the, depression medication or psychotropic medication. We should ask ourselves, do I like what I'm doing? Do I like the people I'm around?
The root problem, right?
Yeah. Am I doing any exercise? Let's get to the root of these problems instead of just trying to medicate our problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. You also mentioned a nice example regarding this subject with the person that asked you this question with the guitar. Can you tell that? I think it's such an inspiring situation.
Sure.
Can you tell us about it?
Sure. There was I was in Youth of Today, which is a very popular hardcore band, a straight edge band in New York City. And when I discovered there was an ashram I could visit in Brooklyn, I would go to Brooklyn and I met a person, and I share this in my book, and we'd have a very spiritual relationship. I'd ask him questions, he'd give me answers, questions and answers. It was a beautiful spiritual dialectical relationship, and we were very focused on our spiritual life. I was boiling over with spiritual questions, and he had beautiful answers for me. And one day he asked me a question which was very out of character. He asked me about my music. Now, he always encouraged me. He just said, keep doing music and do it for God. And so one day he asked me, well, what type of guitar does your guitar player play? And I thought that was weird that he even knew anything about guitars. And I said, well, he plays a Gibson Les Paul. Why do you ask? He said, well, I used to play the guitar, but I don't anymore, because for me, it was Maya. Now, Maya means like illusion or like entangling. And I said, well, what do you mean it was Maya? I thought you told me that I should use my music in service of a divine mission. He goes, yeah, it is, and I think you're doing it well, but for me, it was Maya. And I said, well, wait a second. You said, and the Bhagavad Gita says, that we shouldn't give up what we're good at, but we should use it in a spiritual way. Why would you give up the guitar playing if you were good at it when it was your gift and we're meant to give back with the gift? This is what you teach me. This is what the Bhagavad Gita teaches me. I mean, frankly, I find it a little hypocritical that you're not doing it yourself. And I was a little bit challenging to him. And he cut me very quickly and just said, okay, next time you're on stage, see if you're doing it to serve God or to be God. And when he said that phrase, it resonated so deeply with me and my presentation or my public persona. Am I on stage to serve the center or be the center? And I tell you, that phrase, it still stays with me to this day. I think about it maybe on a daily basis, not just in getting up on stage, but in teaching a yoga class, having a friendship, how I relate to my children, how I relate to my mother. Am I doing this to be God? Am I trying to impress people with my knowledge or my background or my accomplishments? Or am I trying to serve a greater good in all those relationships? And I actually realized what he said was, it was very mature of him to realize we may be good at something, but that very thing triggers us to make bad choices. And he had the strength to give up that talent, because sometimes there are talents, there are people, there's places, there are things that we have in our life that push us down a slippery slope, that we can't get out of. For example, some people are nice people, but they're addicted to gambling. And it's not like you should hate yourself for that. Just don't hang out in Las Vegas. Don't hang out in Las Vegas if you're addicted to gambling. We have to know what our triggers are. And it takes a type of intellectual maturity to know that this is where I act different. I go to this place, when I'm around these people, I act in a different way. When I'm in these places, I act in a different way. When I have these things around me, I act in a different way. And he knew that when he got up and played guitar, it was too much for him to handle. Now, that may seem a little crazy for some of us. But when you're into this world of spirituality, where you're trying to find pleasure internally and not just for pleasure from the ego, then you get it. And a lot of us are just still trying to find pleasure from the ego. We're trying to find pleasure. Where can I impress people? How can I impress people? Can I do it with my jokes, with my wisdom, with my money, with my platinum credit card, with my worldliness, with my intelligence? Or can I do it? Can I find pleasure from the self? There's two different types of pleasure in this world: pleasure from the self and pleasure from the ego. One will give you what you actually want, and one will cheat you again and again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so inspiring. And regarding this one, you also mentioned oftentimes this phrase, which I also like a lot. Maybe you can tell something about that as well. If Krishna or God likes you, he gives you everything, and if he loves you, he takes it away.
Sure. If Krishna likes you, gives you whatever you want, and if he loves you, he takes it all away. Sometimes in this world, I think we notice this on our spiritual path, that we start getting what we want. We start feeling better about ourselves. We learn how to control our senses and our mind. We deal with kinder people, more grounded people. We have enlightening information. It's like God is giving us and making us even sensually feel like I'm in a better place than I ever have been. Almost like when an alcoholic gets into recovery, they feel like, wow, I'm in a whole different world now. But sometimes as we practice spiritual life, we find that we lose things. Now, don't get me wrong. Once you have a material body, we're setting ourselves up to lose things. It's not like only the spiritualist will lose things. Anyone who has a body will lose the things they love. And that is a very difficult pill to swallow. Once we have a body, which is all of us, we will lose everything and everyone that loves us. So isn't that weird that we're in a world and we're trying desperately to fall in love with people, places, and things, yet all of them are temporary? They're almost like ephemeral. They're almost dreamlike. I mean, can you remember being in a relationship or a marriage 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and you were dating for a year or 2 years or 5 years maybe, and then that relationship is over now, and you look back and it's like a dream. It's like a dream. The apartment was like a dream, the flat you lived in, or the house you lived in, what you were talking about, where you're. This world is so dreamlike. So we're going to lose everything anyway. But for the spiritualist, when they lose their stuff or their health or their money, right? Or their home. They see that as, oh, I get it. God or Krishna or the universe is taking everything away. So I have no other shelter except him. God's taking everything away. Because sometimes, even when things are tough, I'll lean into some wealth or my bank account, or I'll lean into my good looks and charm, or I'll lean into my whatever I use to manipulate people in the material world. But sometimes we get in a desperate situation where we lose things that we thought were us. Because very often we confuse our identity, our spiritual identity, our real identity, with our occupation, with our bank balance, with the car we drive. It sounds crazy, but we identify. If I drive a Mercedes, I'm known as the guy who drives a Mercedes or BMW. And if I'm a big, strong, beautiful guy or girl, I identify with my body as myself. If I have beautiful, long, flowing hair, I think, oh, that hair is me. Sometimes guys with beautiful hair lose their hair, and they lose their mind in the process because they're so frustrated. Or sometimes we look in the mirror and we realize I'm getting older. Or sometimes we get a chronic disease. So we realize our stuff, our body, even our children or family or what, they're not ours, and we can't own them or control them. And so a spiritualist will get a materialist will get bitter, but a spiritualist will get better. A spiritualist will grow from this situation. And that's what happens when put into these reversals in life. Instead of getting bitter and angry at the world and shouting at God, why me? We'll say, okay, now it's meant to catapult me, shoot me up higher, like jumping on a trampoline, so I can jump higher than I ever jumped before. This is what the gift of pain is giving me now. It's giving me a chance to grow.
Yeah, amazing.
Makes sense?
And totally, absolutely. I mean, I think that there was also this, the verse of the Gita that you mentioned in the book, right? This one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward is actually the perfect mystic. He's liberated in the supreme, and ultimately he attains the supreme. And you mentioned in the book that was absolutely the verse you needed to hear at that time in your life.
Yes, there is. We get to a certain point, hopefully we get to a certain point, where we start to realize there's nothing out there that can make my heart happy. There's nothing of this material world that will fulfill my heart. There's nothing I can purchase. There's no vacation. I need a spiritual lifestyle because I'm a spiritual being. This doesn't mean I'm just going to go to Costa Rica and live on the beach. It's not like that. We are a spiritual being. We need spiritual, because I've seen people who move to Costa Rica and live on the beach. Oftentimes they just become alcoholics. It's not just getting a better place to live. When we are finding our spiritual calling, we'll live anywhere. We'll live in a ghetto if that's where the calling is. Mother Teresa went to the streets of Calcutta, in the ghetto of Calcutta. Why? Because that's where her spiritual calling was. So it's got nothing to do with, I need to be more spiritual. I need to go to Beverly Hills or Costa Rica or, Thailand. No, that's not necessarily spiritual. There's a lot of people in Thailand, Costa Rica, or Beverly Hills doing a lot of material things as well. Yeah. Our material thing is I go where God, I go where I want to go. Our spiritual thing is I go where God is directing my heart. And that's a biggie. That's a big one.
Yeah. What would you say? I mean, sometimes there are people, for example, in the yogic scene, where people also talk to students. Okay, I go to that teacher, to this one, and then people say, "Oh no, he's too spiritual," or I'm not that into spirituality. What would you say?
Well, that's okay. I mean, people get what you want. Some people really just want to do Hanumanasana or Supta Baddha Kurmasana or some yogic pose, and they want to be more open with their body, healthy with their body, a little calmer mind. You get whatever you want out of this world, If you want spiritual life, you can have it, but you got to want it. If you want to get good at yoga, good at bowling, good at violin, you just got to want it, and then you can get it. If you're lucky, you can get it. With spiritual life is the same way. If you want it, you can get it. But that's why when we are practicing our spiritual life, you got to understand it deeply and you got to practice it deeply. And from there, you can disseminate it in a deep way. If you can't disseminate it in a deep way, then you don't really understand it. You ever meet a person, you ask them a question and they talk for about an hour, but the real teacher can speak in just a few words and it disseminates right into your skull. So we have to become expert teachers of spirituality so that when people hear it, they're like, okay, that makes sense. A teacher has to understand their audience. A teacher has to know exactly what to say, how much medicine to give people. And we have to be convinced that spiritual medicine is what everybody wants. I'm already convinced. Whenever I meet somebody, I'm convinced this person, they need spirit in their life, because most people don't realize that. Most people think, well, I'm a material being. I need some material pleasures. When a person comes with me with some type of pain they're going through, in my heart of hearts, I think, well, they really need their spiritual life. There's no way to fix a material problem except through spiritual life, because we're spiritual beings. You know, for example, if I walk around thinking I'm a cat, or putting on a cat outfit, and I say, yeah, I got to catch a mouse. Catching mice is not going to fulfill you. You're a spirit. You got to understand, like, you're not this costume. We are walking around in different costumes, trying to find peace in a prison cell. You know, we need to see that there's light outside the prison cell. There's beautiful rolling hills, and there's a freedom outside of the bondage of material existence. I'm not saying the material world can't be fun. Just like if you go to prison, hey, there's basketball, there's weightlifting, you know. But there's so much better right outside the window. And by the way, the material world isn't fun for everybody. Sometimes material world is pain from the time they were born to the time they die. So maybe we have some good karma or some good fortune, and we can see, well, yeah, material world's great. What about the people who are born into suffering and that will die into suffering? There's a lot of people like that in the world. So while we are in a place where we're not suffering tremendously, we should use our intelligence and our peace of mind to say, you know what? The material world is temporary. I'm a spiritual being, and there's an urgency to get serious about my spiritual life.
Yeah. Absolutely. And regarding that, I mean, it's also different from person to person, but in your eyes, how would you describe a good or healthy sadhana?
Sadhana means a regular spiritual practice. And so if we want to get good at anything, we need a regular practice of anything. If I want to get good at playing the drums, I got to have a regular practice. If I want to get good at martial arts, I need a regular practice of martial arts. If we want to change the way we think, we have to hear wisdom on a regular basis. So these books like the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, they're very powerful books for transformation. Although I'm not going to say they're the only books of wisdom in the world. They're the two that really resonate with me and the traditions of Vedic thought that I study and I teach. But there's a lot of books of wisdom out there. And you have to hear it on a regular basis, because that's how we change. And then, of course, a spiritual practice of, especially in my tradition, we chant on beads, on malas, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And that is, we do it for a regulated amount of time. You'll notice that you start to change when you do things in a regulated way. Even if you say, you know what, I know I should give up smoking pot, or I know I should give up alcohol. I just can't. Okay, try to give it up in a regulated way. Like every Friday you won't drink, or Friday and Monday I won't drink, or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday I won't drink. So you're right. Maybe we can't give up. Maybe we can't be full spiritualists overnight, and maybe we can't give up bad habits, but we can regulate our life, because from the regulation of our senses It's almost like the cobra has his fangs taken out. He's still a cobra, right? But he's not as deadly. Once I tell my senses, nope, you can't do this anymore. You can do it once a week. You can do it twice a week. Then all of a sudden, the noose of the addiction releases you and gives you a little bit, because now you can start to sharpen intelligence. And intelligence controls the senses. Your senses, right? Your mind, your tongue, your belly, your genitals, they shouldn't control your intelligence. You know, we even have a saying like this. At least in America, they say, "Oh, this guy's got a dick for brains," meaning he's gonna have sex with some woman he doesn't even love or doesn't even care about. He's not even thinking about who this person is. His brains is like his penis. Why? Because he's not thinking with his intelligence. His senses have become his master, and the senses and the mind make a horrible master. What makes a great master is the intelligence. So how do you get your intelligence strong and back on track? You hear wisdom on a regular basis. And the intelligence becomes the master. Otherwise, it's like driving a car. When you're holding the steering wheel and you're going down this hill in San Francisco, you got to hold on tight. If you let go of the wheel of the car, who's driving who? Now the car is driving you. You got to hold on to the wheel. So in the same way, when I'm driving, I'm letting go of the steering wheel. That's not good. In the same way, when my senses control me, that's not good. It will not give me the desired result. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It makes sense a lot. And
you know why it makes sense? Because it's not mine. It's the teachings of truth, and no one has a monopoly on truth. Hindu culture doesn't have it. Islamic culture doesn't have on it. Judeo-Christian culture doesn't. Truth is truth. It's for all people of all times. Truth is true in past, present, and future.
Yeah.
And it's like math. And so Vedic teachings just teach truth. And therefore, if I hear the truth, that's good. If I apply the truth, that's even better. And that's what we're trying to practice. First, we hear it, and then we try to apply it.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes if you look at the scriptures, it's not so easy to understand for everybody. So we always need also people who can translate these truths, right? So as you did, for example, with the 6 pillars of bhakti, can you just you don't need to do it like in a long way, just break them down, the 6 pillars of bhakti. And I heard you write a book about them as well, right?
This is my next book coming.
Perfect.
The 6 pillars.
That's good.
And the beautiful thing about these teachings, which again are not mine, but I've extracted from the teachings.
Yeah.
They will not just make your spiritual life magical. They'll make your life on this planet magical if you can imbibe them. So the first one is, let's say that I will not criticize. So that doesn't mean we throw all of our discernment out the window. It means we're not indulging in fault finding. Because when I find fault in other people, oftentimes that's a smoke screen for dealing with my own issues.
And it's getting so fast, right?
Yeah. The next one is I'm tolerant. So if criticism is intolerant with people, tolerance is I want to tolerate places and situations and stop my complaining. That's a sign of becoming tolerant. I'm going to stop all my complaining. The third one is I take no offense, meaning to the degree that I hold on to resentment and anger in a day, in a week, in a month, in years, in decades, I'm still angry at my father or my mother or my uncle. This is my problem. This isn't their problem. And I can't move forward. I can't drive my vehicle forward if I'm looking in the rearview mirror. So I can't let my past continually affect my future. And that's what happens with people who are living in resentment and anger. They're living in their past, and they can never experience the freedom of letting that go. So that's why forgiveness is a pillar in every spiritual community. The next one is
one question.
Yeah,
Why
sure.
do you think it's still so hard? I mean, also when I'm doing coachings when it comes to forgiveness, so many people say, no, I never will forgive. And, because it was so hard to what they did to me. And why do you think it's so hard to see that it's actually more helpful than to cling on it?
We have to analyze resentment and the benefits. Here's what happens with resentment. Suppose you and me are in a relationship and there's some hurt between us. You hurt me and you stopped talking to me and you spoke ill about me, for something that I did. So I can be really hurt and resentful and betrayal. And you say, hey, give up your resentment. What did he do to you anyway? Well, he spoke ill about me to all my friends. He broke up our friendship. I let him borrow my car and he dented the car. And so I have a story about you and how you hurt me. And I want to tell it again and again and again. And it's a truth. It has some truth to it. You did dent my car. You did betray me. You hurt me. But it's not the absolute truth. It's a partial truth. If you were to say, well, what percentage of the relationship fell short? Was it all him or was it partly you? I'd say, well, it was like 5% me maybe and 95% him. It's generally a lie. It's generally not a lie because there's usually two sides to a story. If you want the whole story, you got to hear both sides, isn't it? And so, first of all, if I tell my story of pain, of woe, of hurt to people, they'll say, oh, Raghu, that's so sad. That's so unfair of what he did. And I get a lot of comfort. But if I tell my story about what I did and what my responsibility was, I will not get that stroke anymore. But what I will get is a chance not to behave that way again. And generally, it's much more than 5% in a breakup of relationship, in a divorce, in a broken relationship with a teenager or an older child. We have much more generally in the pie, the slice of a pie in the broken relationship than we thought. Because there is an objective truth and then there's a partial truth. And I tend to live in a partial truth because it strokes my ego. It makes me feel I'm right. It doesn't let me empathize. I'm not good at empathy. And these are things I have to work on. Empathy is a key to actually having relationships. Empathy is a key to love. And if all I can if you want to get into political wars, imagine if two sides would just empathize with each other. Imagine if Israel said, you know what? Let me hear your side. Let me understand you guys. And then Palestine would say, well, actually, let me hear you guys. Let me hear what you guys are going through. I mean, that's the only way things are going to change. Yeah. You want a relationship to work, you have to empathize. You have to listen to understand before you're understood. You can't just say, well, listen to me. Here's what's going on through me. You got to say, okay, I want to listen to you. I want you to empty your cup. But oftentimes I have so much ego invested in why I'm right. There will never be any peace.
Yeah.
So if you have two good people who actually want to heal something, it can happen. But they have to be open for reconciliation. But oftentimes we dig in our heels and we don't want peace. We just want to be right.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't like to give up resentment, even though resentment's a poison they're taking. They think, well, I'm going to hate him. That'll teach him. I hate his guts. Sometimes we hate people that are dead. Oh, I hated my father. I hated my mother. You think you're better off now hating a dead person? You think you're punishing them? No, you're not punishing them. They're dead.
Mm-hmm.
You're just carrying around hate. Hate kills us. Again, This isn't my genius. These are universal truth. So that's the third one, the resentment. Then I see the good in others and I let them know it, right? Appreciating people. Instead of looking what's wrong with people, seeing the good in others and letting them know why they're good. That's a very beautiful thing. That's a very powerful thing, to see good in other people instead of just finding what people are doing wrong, correcting them on a regular basis, telling them how they should do it differently. See what they're doing right. It's not going to work good in parenting, in relationships, in friendships, telling a person what they're doing wrong all the time. See the good in people. The next one is being quick to apologize. Noticing when you've done something wrong, when you're obtuse, oblivious, and say, you know what? I think I might have been out of line here. Can you forgive me? Oftentimes they don't see it, but we're becoming more aware of our shortcomings. That's important, to be introspective, or else we just plow over people. And the last one is we're grateful and we keep a list of our blessings. So sometimes we tend to focus on what we don't have. And now we're shifting the focus as to how fortunate we are to have what we have. And that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah. And for someone who likes to experience these teachings and integrate them in their lives, I mean, there's a great chance each January at the Eco Village in India with you, Kausthuba, and a lot of other great teachers to... Yeah, you can tell about that.
Yeah, well, we have special courses in January in India. We're hosted by the Govardhan Eco Village, which is just north of Mumbai. It's a beautiful center, retreat center outside the cacophony of Mumbai. It's very pristine, beautiful orchards and trees. It's so nice. And you were there. Yeah. But we do a 200-hour yoga teacher training, a 300-hour training. I give all the classes on philosophy and lifestyle. And we also do, for our podcast, a wisdom training where we study sacred literature as well. Then we do a music training. We do 2 music trainings, the classical Indian drum and how to lead kirtan. Those are 2 trainings we're offering this year as well. And yeah, it's a wonderful program, great way to get away. That's all on my website, Raghunath, Raghunath .yoga. And if you go to trainings, you can look up all the trainings we're doing in India. Quite lovely and wonderful.
Yeah, we put all the links in the show notes anyways, so they find you there. And yeah, it was such a pleasure to see you again, to meet you again, to talk to you again. Hopefully
Tomas.
soon.
Keep up the great work, brother.
You too. You do it anyways. Is there any chance? I mean, I was asking anyways. When are you coming back to Germany? Maybe doing something here again.
I'm going to Italy to do our program there. We have a retreat every year in Italy, which is wonderful. And then I'm going to Croatia with my children on a vacation for a little bit, and then I'm doing a program in Sarajevo. I have no plans as of now for Germany, but I would love to get back to Berlin for sure.
Yeah, it would be amazing to have you here again.
Thank you, my friend. Okay, keep up the good work.
You too. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks
Thank you so much
for putting out this ripple effect of good energy. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Hare Krishna.
Bye-bye. Hare Krishna.